Hi everyone, so welcome back to the audit session, and today our topic for the further discussion in audit will be evaluating the audit findings. How do we evaluate the findings that we have identified? Any misstatement, any risks uh, that has not been like properly documented? So how we all evaluate all those? So we will understood that in our today's audit session. So, firstly, to begin with, evaluating the sufficiency and appropriateness of the audit evidence. So, based on the audit procedures performed and the audit evidence obtained, the auditor should evaluate before the conclusion of the audit whether assessment of the RMM at the relevant assertions level remain appropriate or not. Sufficient appropriate audit evidence has been obtained. In the sufficient appropriate audit evidence, consider all the relevant audit evidence, regardless of whether it appears to corroborate or contradict the assertions in the FS. And if the auditor has not obtained sufficient appropriate audit evidence but about a relevant assertion, the auditor should not attempt to obtain the further audit evidence. But if auditor is unable to obtain the sufficient appropriate audit evidence, then the auditor should express a qualified opinion or disclaimer of the opinion in that case. Audit of the FS is a cumulative and iterative process. As the auditor performs planned audit procedures, the audit evidence obtained may cause the auditor to modify the anity of the planned audit procedures. So, information may come to the auditor's attention that that differs significantly from the information on which the risk assessments were based. Few of the examples are extent of the misstatement that the auditor detects by performing substantive procedures which may alter the auditor's professional judgment about the risk assessment. Similarly, auditor may become the aware of the discrepancies in the audit accounting records or analytical procedures performed at the overall review stage of audit may indicate the previously unrecognized RMM. So, in such circumstances, the auditor may need to evaluate the planned audit procedures based on the revised consideration of the assessed risk for all or some of the classes of the transactions, account balances, or disclosures and related assertions. Also, auditor cannot assume that the instance of the fraud or error is isolated occurrence. Therefore, the consideration of how the detection of the misstatement affects the assessed RMA is important in determining whether the assessment remains appropriate. Also, auditors' professional judgment about what constitutes sufficient appropriate audit evidence is influenced by few of the factors such as significance of the potential misstatement in the relevant assertions, effectiveness of the management's response, experience gained during the previous audits with respect to the similar potential misstatement, result of the audit procedure performed, source and reliability of the information available, persuasiveness of the audit evidence, and understanding the entity environment. So these are the factors uh, based on the auditor's professional judgment which constitutes the sufficient appropriate audit evidence. So further moving forward, evaluating the misstatements that was identified during the audit. So evaluating the effect of the identified misstatement on the audit. Accumulation of the identified misstatements. So auditor should accumulate the misstatement identified during the audit other than those that are clearly trivial. Misstatement may result from the fraud or error and may be distinguished as factual misstatement, judgmental misstatement, or projected misstatement. So, factual misstatement about which there is no doubt, the based on the facts. Judgmental misstatement arises from the unreasonable accounting estimates or selection of the application of the inappropriate accounting policies. And the projected misstatement are the auditor's basis arises when auditors' best estimate of the misstatement is in the entire population based on the projection of the misstatement identified in the audit samples. Auditor may designate an amount below which misstatement would be clearly trivial and would not be accumulated. Clearly trivial is not an expression of the non-material. Matters that are clearly trivial will be wholly different order depending on the order of the magnitude that materiality and the clearly certainly inconsequential. So that doesn't relate to the materiality. Consideration of the identified misstatement. as the audit progress. Auditors should determine whether the overall audit strategy and the audit plan needs to be revised if either nature of the identified misstatement and the circumstances of those occurrence indicate the other misstatement may exist. Aggregate of the misstatement accumulated during the audit approaches in materiality. So these are the factors when the consideration should be given to that. Communication and corrections of the misstatement. Auditors should communicate on timely basis with appropriate level of the management all the misstatement accumulated during the audit. Also, the auditor should request management to correct those misstatements. If the auditors request management has examined a class of transactions, accounts, balance or disclosure and corrected misstatement that were detected, the auditor should perform the additional audit procedures to determine whether misstatement remains or not. And if the management refuses to correct the sum or of all the misstatement communicated by the auditor should obtain an understanding of the management's reason for not making the correction and should take the account into the understanding the consideration for why the misstatement has not been corrected and that should be properly documented. Also, effect of the evaluating the uncorrected misstatement. Prior to the evaluating the effect of the uncorrected misstatement, audit should reassess the materiality to confirm whether it remains appropriate in the context of the entity's actual financial results. As the audit progresses, materiality for the FS as a whole is revised if the auditor becomes aware of the information during the audit that would have caused the auditor to have determined a different amount initially. Also, auditors should determine whether uncorrected misstatements are materially, individually, or in aggregate. In the making the determination, the auditor should consider size and nature of the misstatement, both in the relation to the particular classes of the transactions, balances, disclosures, and affairs as a whole. Also, effect of uncorrected misstatement prior to the prior periods and the relevant classes of the transactions, balance, disclosures, and affairs as a whole. Even if the impact of the uncorrected misstatement to the current period financial statement is immaterial, the auditor should communicate to the management that the misstatement may cause future period financial statement to be misstated. Uh, in the documentation part, amount of below which misstatement would be clearly regarded as clearly trigger should be documented. All the misstatement accumulated during the audit and whether they have been corrected or not. Auditor's conclusion about whether uncorrected misstatement are materially individual or aggregate on the basis of the conclusion. These all three should be properly documented. Also, the adjusting journal entries that were passed on to correct the misstatement should be documented. So, what was the previous impact and what was the impact after correcting that? That should be properly shown in the workings and properly documented. After that, performing analytical procedures in the overall review. Analytical procedures is mandatory for the overall review of the audit. Auditor should design and perform the analytical procedures near the end of the audit that assist the auditor when performing the overall conclusion about whether financial statements are consistent with the auditor's understanding of the entity. So, at the planning is also done to understand the current developments and changes from the past year, and at the conclusion also overall analytical planning is performed. A wide variety of analytical procedures may be used when forming an overall conclusion. These procedures may include reading financial statement and considering adequacy of the evidence gathered in the response to the usual, unusual, expected, inconsistent balances and unusual, unexpected, inconsistent balances or relationships that were not previously identified. Also, they may be similar to the analytical procedures used as the risk assessment procedures. Result of these analytical procedures may indicate the additional evidence is needed, which requires auditor to perform the additional procedures. Also, identify the previously unrecognized RML, which requires the auditor to revise the auditor's assessment of RML and modify the further audit planned, which were planned accordingly. So that was about the today's topic was about the evaluating the sufficiency and appropriateness of the audit evidence. So basically, it was how we perform the analytical procedures at the completion stage, what happens when the misstatement is identified, how it is documented. All these we discussed. So please let me know in the comment section if you have any queries on this topic, and I will we will further learn about the forming of opinion on the financial statement in the next chapter. So let me know if you have any queries. Thank you and bye.